Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, I Like to Cake. Today I'm going to show you how to make an American Girl themed cake. This cake in particular was for a birthday party where the theme was Paris and this American Girl Truly Me doll. Since the American Girl doll's hair was pink and blue, those were the colors that I chose to feature on the cake. The first thing we want to do for this cake is to grab a little bit of your icing and spread that out in the middle of your cake board to help the cake stick to the cake board. And then take your first cake circle and place that on top of the cake board. Then go ahead and spread out your filling on top of that layer. And then repeat stacking cake circles and filling until you've used up all of your cake. When you're spreading out your filling, you want to try and make it as level as possible because this will give a level foundation for your next layer of cake, and if you can keep every layer level, you'll end up with a level cake overall. When you put the last layer of cake on top, it really helps if you put it on upside down so that you have a nice flat surface on top. Now we're going to do the crumb coat. This is a very thin layer of icing that helps seal in all of the crumbs so that you don't have crumbs showing through your final icing layer. Once you finish the crumb coat, put the cake in the fridge for 20 to 30 minutes so that the outside is cold. This will help the next layer of frosting stick to the crumb coat much better. This also helps to seal in all of those crumbs into the crumb coat. Once we pull that out of the fridge, we're going to do our final top coat of frosting. This layer is going to be thicker than the crumb coat, and we're trying to get a smooth finish on this one because this will be our final layer of frosting. In order to get a smooth edge, you want to use a bench scraper like I'm using, or anything that has a straight edge that can smooth out the sides of the cake. After you smooth it out, make sure you wipe off the excess icing before going back to smooth it out some more. Now we're going to do the writing on top of the cake. So for this, I first take a sharp tool, you could also just use a toothpick, and draw out the letters that you're going to write with the icing. So this basically just acts as a guide, and you can easily smooth it over if you mess up. Once you put the icing down, it's a little bit harder to fix mistakes, so this is a really helpful step. Now we're going to go in with our icing and pipe over the guides that we just made. There are certain characteristics to the American Girl font that I tried to follow here, mainly the serifs and some of the thicker areas of the letters. I don't have a piping tip on my piping bag, I just snipped off a very small hole at the end, but you could also use a very small round piping tip. Now I'm just going back in with my sharp tool to refine some of the edges. And lastly, we're going to go in and pipe on the star that is very characteristic of the American Girl font. Now we're going to follow a similar process for the Eiffel Tower on the top of this cake. Use a sharp tool or a toothpick and draw some outlines, and then we're going to go over it with black icing this time. Again, I don't have a piping tip, but you're welcome to use a small round piping tip for this as well. Once again, we're going to follow the same process to write the American Girl logo on the side of the cake, as well as one more Eiffel Tower. Whenever you're piping with frosting, it's a good idea to clean your tip off every so often, because the piping tip can get a lot of icing built up on it, and that may ruin whatever you're piping out. This is especially important for small details or writing like this here. Now we're going to put together our multicolored icing bag. So I have some pink buttercream and some blue buttercream. I have put them each into a Ziploc bag and snipped the end off. And then I have a piece of saran wrap or cling wrap on the countertop. It might be kind of hard to see. And I'm just piping out logs of the icing in alternating colors. Now we're going to roll this up to make one giant log of multicolored icing. We want this to be kind of tight and try to force out any air bubbles, so just gather up the ends of the plastic wrap and kind of roll this into basically like a large sausage. Now I have a large piping bag and I fitted it with a 4B Wilton piping tip, and I'm going to grab my multicolored icing log, snip off one of the ends of the plastic wrap, and put that end first into the piping bag. That open end should be where the piping tip is. Now gently squeeze the piping bag so that the icing comes down to the tip, and make sure you twist off the top end of the piping bag so that none of the icing escapes out of the top while you're using it. Now we're ready to use this to decorate our cake. Before you start decorating, make sure you squeeze out some of the icing onto a spare paper towel or something until you get the multicolor that you're looking for. Sometimes when you first squeeze it out, you might get all pink or all blue, so just keep squeezing until you get what you want. First, I'm using this icing to pipe a shell border around the bottom of the cake. So what you do for a shell border is you apply some pressure to pipe out a blob, and then you drag the end away while releasing pressure from the piping bag. When you start your next shell, try to overlap the previous one a little bit. I also chose to rotate my piping bag a little bit after I piped a few shells, just so that I can vary the pattern of the pink and blue icing. One little tip that I have for piping borders is that I usually start at the back of the cake so that I can kind of get the hang of it. If I mess up a little bit, it's okay. Nobody really looks at the back of the cake. Now we're going to use the same icing on top, and I'm using again the same piping tip, and we're just going to pipe out some little swirls. To do this, hold your piping bag up vertically, place it just a little bit above the surface of the cake, apply a decent amount of pressure, and barely swirl your tip around. You don't need to create very big swirls here. You're almost just moving it in a slightly back and forth motion. Meanwhile, you're pulling up, and then when you get to the tip, you want to release the pressure off of your piping bag. Now I'm piping some decorations on the sides with the same icing and the same piping tip. I'm basically just piping some stars, so now you want to hold the icing bag horizontally so that the piping tip is perpendicular to the surface of the cake. Keep your piping tip very close to the surface, apply some pressure, and then stop applying pressure and lift off. Make sure you completely stop applying pressure before you lift off, otherwise you won't get a nice flat star like this. Now I'm just putting on some final finishing touches. I have these large sprinkles and I'm using my fingers to place them on. You can also use tweezers, but I find that they tend to slip out of the tweezers and I feel more comfortable just using my fingers. I also have some small pink sprinkles that I'm going to place on the same way. And that's it. That is our American Girl in Paris themed cake. Thanks for watching.